Good evening and welcome to tonight's webinar. It's the top 5 mistakes most vets make when hiring and how to avoid them, and most importantly, how to avoid them. Tonight we are going to cover quite a lot of ground, and I am absolutely delighted to be joined by my good friend and mentor, and Nancy, the HR guru of the planet, Slessenger. Evening, Nancy.
Hi, Dave. Hello, everyone.
Hope everybody's all good. Now, I suppose just the first thing we'll do is just a little sound check. Make sure that those of you online tonight can actually hear us. So there's a little chat box should be appeared on your right. If anybody would take a second just down the bottom of that to ping us a wee message and let us know that we're coming through. That would be fabulous. Thanks, Nancy. You can hear me. Great, I can hear you. So yeah. we can keep each other entertained, if nothing else. So yeah, just brilliant. Okay, some people
good. Laura can hear us.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, great. So we've got a lot to cover tonight, and absolutely a lot of value. This is actually, we've tried to squeeze in as much value as we can tonight. We've got 2 webinars that we do condensed down into one, and we're going to try and not labour too many of the points and just.
But don't worry, everyone, because I'll be chivying Dave along if he starts blethering too much on one point.
That is actually your job.
It is, yeah. So make sure we get everything in, because that is really important, isn't it, Dave?
Yep,
that we get all the 2 points.
Absolutely. So let's crack on, shall we?
Okay.
So this is me and Nancy, all right, in case, like, really briefly, because this is the least important part of the whole thing, but for those of you who do not know me, I have been a vet for 20 years. I've been managing veterinary practices for the last decade. Started out as a manager within a bigger mini corporate practice here in England, then moved to be a performance coach for a much bigger group of practices in the south of England, and then emigrated to Australia. I bought my own first hospital, fully owned by myself, in 2011. 3.5 years later, with Nancy's help, I exited that business, having, I think we sort of 2.5, almost 3x the revenue. Same number of staff increase, probably slightly less than that, and sold the group as one of the top performing practices in Australia. Then I worked as chief veterinary officer for the business that acquired mine for the next 18 months, and then migrated back to England, and now working with practices to try and build basically growth using people. So whether that's, when I say people, either I'm going to be talking about clients, or the subject of tonight's webinar is your people, your human resource. So that's me in a nutshell. Nancy, mic to you.
Dave, I wish you wouldn't do that sort of thing to me. So I'm Nancy Slessenger, and I'm just a tiny bit older than Dave. My background is physics, and then I worked as a production manager, manufacturing director. I worked at Mars to start with, as in the chocolate bar people, but the electronic part of it.
As in people who've just bought a 20% market share of the veterinary market in the US.
Really? Yes, I didn't know that. Is that from Pedigree? I suppose the Pedigree.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is huge,
right.
Actually.
Huge. Yeah.
Well, yes, those. In fact, those very people.
But it doesn't make you a bad person.
I don't eat Mars bars. And I spent about 10 years working in industry, in manufacturing management, and then also in export sales for a while. And then I started a company, Vine House, doing management training and development. And then I ran into Dave. He'd bought this practice and really needed some help turning it round, because it was working all right, except just every time he went away, it all went back to zero, didn't it, basically? So we did a lot of work hiring a new team, and, well, not just the new team, we also helped to get the people who were there really performing and doing a great job. And so what we found was we developed this way of hiring people into your practice that was really efficient and got some very high success rate. So we started working on doing that for other people as well. In fact, it was your accountants, wasn't it, who suggested we should start doing that as a business? Because I started doing stuff for them as well.
Yes.
And so Yeah, that's why I'm
So here
here.
we are. So tonight's journey is actually basically a recap of every mistake that I've made
Mm.
over the last
No, we're not going to keep people
decade.
there that long, Dave.
No, that'd be too long for an hour. Wouldn't
Yeah.
it? And then really the most important thing is how you can learn, how you can fast track by not doing those things. Okay,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
that's enough said about that, really. Okay, so the first question is, and I've challenged everybody, every audience I've presented to, any conference I've presented on the planet, when we're talking about people, I always say, tell me a problem in your business that is not about people. Like, well, somehow we can relate it back to people every single time. And thus far, in I think 15 goes in front of big audiences, no one has come up with something that was not related to a people person. So if you can think of any, please bung them in the chat box. I'd love to see it, and I'll definitely give you a shout out for that. But the chances are this is the central thing that everybody in business needs to be talking about. Okay, and the question is, do you have these guys? I've been fortunate enough to have a little career break and spent some time in Barcelona, where they do this absolutely bonkers thing where they build massive towers of human beings.
Oh, I didn't realize what that was. Right.
They're the
Fantastic.
Castellers. And it's a Catalan tradition. And so they have this massive base of people at the bottom. And that looks like a really badly organized scrum / line out rugby type thing gone horribly wrong. Or I think people call that Gaelic football. But it's not. That's like a really geometrically well organized base of people all supporting. And what you don't see in this slide is how high these towers go up. So they do various formations. Now, what's really interesting is you will see the little person who's going to climb right up on top of the person above is like about an 8-year-old child. So
That's that little one on the right there, isn't
right, and they will go 3 or 4, 5 stories up high.
Wow.
Everyone's got a job, everyone's got a team, and these guys, they train, they practice, and they're a super important part of the community. They're a big part of the Catalan identity. So have you got a coherent, connected, focused on a purpose team like that? Or if you get something a little bit more like this, and Nancy and I are both terrible sci-fi geeks, so forgive the odd reference to some sort of cult TV show or other. But this is the honest question that everybody who has people in their businesses ought to be asking themselves. And which one would you like? That's kind of an obvious question. But a lot of practices have not necessarily everybody who is a zombie, but more zombies than they should walking around.
And actually you only need one to cause you a lot of problems, don't you?
Heck yeah, as we are about to see. Now, Nancy's Mission Impossible, okay? So here's what we're going to try and cover. We are going to cover it. The try bit is we're going to try and do this for you by 9 o'clock. Now,
there is no try, only do, Dave.
Nancy, I put the minor delays possible because if and people, if you have to go at 9, you go at 9. But we are going to give you some awesome value tonight. So if we run a little over, I beg forgiveness at this point. We'll really try and run to time. Okay. So we're going to cover scary costs, the top 5 hiring mistakes. And then we're going to give you tips to improve. We're going to start with the costs because I really want you focused on, oh shit, this actually is a big deal. Not just, it doesn't cost that much to hire somebody in the business when they leave, right? Wrong. We'll cover the mistakes people make, give you some tips, a heads up on what we think is a bit of a smarter way of doing it, a little gift as always to come along, and then if you want to fire questions at us, if people are here till 9:30, I'm happy to sit here and answer questions till 9:30. Me and Nancy are at your disposal. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. All right, so first question. What are your biggest recruitment problems? Okay, I don't want you to ping this at me just now. This is kind of a rhetorical question. I want you thinking about this as we go through the webinar, okay? What do you think are the biggest challenges you've got right now? And what is important to you about your recruitment process? I think these are 2 fundamental questions you should be asking of every process in your business, every area of your business. And if you can answer them clearly and then design processes that address the issues, then you've built something that's pretty special and pretty robust. Okay, so keep these questions in mind as we go through.
And I think it's just important to say, when you say your hiring process, it maybe you haven't really got much of a process. So we mean, even if you think, well, it's just, I just put an ad up and then interview whoever comes along. Right. That's what we're referring to.
Perfect. Okay. All right, so that's it, part one, the scary costs of hiring badly. Now, please, if you are not sitting down, if you do not have a little glass of wine or something in your paw, get that, because you need some comfort here, and definitely turn the lights up. It's behind the movie, behind the sofa, scary stuff you're going to get here. Okay, so we're going to start with the first cost, and really this is kind of the cost that everybody thinks about. When you talk to somebody casually and you're saying, how much does it cost you to hire somebody? Then once upon a time, it used to cost, we used to pay like a couple of £1,000. That's about $3,000 or $1 million, depending on the exchange rate with Brexit at the minute. To place that in a print journal for the veterinary record. And it felt like, if you ran that for 4 weeks and you didn't get your candidate, you really start to feel the pinch. And that's certainly the way I used to think about it. Now, a lot of that cost has dropped off now, of course, because of the advent of digital communications and websites and places you can post adverts. But that was the cost that was the headline cost everybody was thinking about, and it still cost a fair penny to get your job adverts out there, certainly in the UK. So that's the first cost. But that's a tiddly little cost. Okay. Number two cost. Now, if you are really good, you might have something as exciting as an induction or an onboarding program, as our American cousins would call that, where you, and this is a revolutionary one, actually give someone some training before they start the job and don't lob them in at the deep end. See, that was worth the entry fee alone. What a concept. So if you spend some time doing that, then you might start to introduce some costs. Well, you as the manager or the vet that you've buddied up with this person is going to be spending much more time focusing on them, not doing their normal work. So the revenues and the production capacity is going to go down. And of course, your new hire is not going to be productive either. So you've squished two people into one, and you effectively do half your revenue or worse. So there's certainly a cost of doing induction. Now, if you have a vet who's capable of generating £1,000 a day, then you're basically pulling that person out of the system, and you put someone on induction for a couple of weeks, like we would, well then you might cost yourself about 14 or 10 to 14,000, depending if you're working weekends. It's starting to get a little bit expensive, and you're starting to think, well, okay, I really think I don't want to be making bad calls when I'm hiring people here. But that is still at the bottom of our rather exponential curve here. And scary cost number three is where we start to get into the zone that people aren't really thinking about. And Nancy, this ties right into just having one zombie in the building, right? And I'm sure you have all wondered why, when somebody leaves, the mood in the whole building improves, or when somebody's on annual leave, suddenly there's a wee spike in revenue and everybody seems a bit happier. Well, that's the impact that the wrong team member, and I'm not necessarily saying somebody who's poor clinically, I'm just saying somebody who doesn't fit the team, that actually in its most hard to deal with circumstance can actually be quite a productive team member. That's the real tricky one, when you've got somebody who's hitting home runs and they actually generate an awful lot of revenue for the business as an individual, but they're just killing everybody else's vibe. Then that's a really tough call. And Yep.
And it could just be 5 or 10% less because they're just not asking the right questions, they're just not suggesting things to your clients and so on. But over a year, that really adds up. And it's easy to just not include that as a cost, but it is a cost.
It is. It's the interesting numbers I could give you here from the work I was doing in Australia. So we were measuring productivity. So like the last thing you want to do is go to a vet and say, hey, you've got to earn, you know, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, however many pounds or dollars a day, because clinical people just don't talk that language, and so you're just not going to get engagement. But as the business owner, you do want to be measuring the performance, and so an interesting ratio to look at is the number of consults coming in the door to the number of procedures that you're actually booking in per full-time equivalent vet. And when you start doing that, you start leveling the playing field quite a lot in terms of who does what. Because you can look at, let's say you look at a day where you do 20 consults and you stick one vet on. Well, a good vet might actually be pushing up to sort of 40, 50% of the things that they're seeing. So we're talking about vaccinations and first presentation consultations. Okay, we're not talking about rechecks or nail clips or anal glands, things like that. So we're talking about things that have the potential to have something wrong, that are walking in for the first time. And a good doctor, veterinarian, will be able to generate an operation out of that at least 3 times more than a poor doctor, or an inexperienced doctor, or somebody who for some reason just isn't connecting with your clients. And that is a huge cost, absolutely huge cost.
But it's one that most people just don't even think about.
Yeah, right.
It's
exactly.
really important to mention that. Sorry,
Correct.
move on, Dave. Move on. We've got
Thank
to get
you.
to the next one.
Well, I see. Just in the interest of speeding things up, I actually said number 4 the other way around.
Yes.
So, yeah, you've got the person. Basically, they're a bit douchey, shall we call them that, and they just piss everybody else in the team off, or they're just like an emotional sinkhole, and they just drain everybody, and the energy sapping nature of somebody like that is horrific. And the punchline in this joke is, if it's the boss who's been there for a long while, doesn't really want to be there anymore, then that just absolutely knackers things, right? And so the impact of that, there's your X impact times the number of other people they have to work with, multiplier effect there. So Nancy, I think if I had to put a cost here, I would say like we know that the data says you can have a poor whose poor revenue might generate you 140, 150,000 pounds a year, and somebody who's a bit of a rock star, in theory, could get, the theoretical is about 750,000. I don't know if everybody does that, but I think somebody who's doing 300 to 400, well, you're looking at, you're losing a couple £100,000 potentially there.
Well, also, Dave, before you move on to number 5, I think we just need to mention the first person that we ever hired together, who increased your sales by, I think it was 25%, wasn't it?
It was.
And I bet no one's going to be able to guess what her job was.
No, I wish we had more time. I tell you what, let's come back to that and just say
because it wasn't a vet.
Right. Guess which position that person was for. We'll come back to that in the chat in a second.
So
okay.
Cost number 5.
So the cost of getting rid of a poor hire. Now, if you do it right, it's stressful. It's not nice. It will have an impact on the team, because people on the way out never skip out the door saying lovely things about you.
But we got the answer, by the way.
It's straight away.
Right, yeah.
Well done. If you get this wrong, then effectively, and constructive dismissal, unfair dismissal claims, discrimination. If you get that wrong, the costs are astronomical. I mean, unlimited is the word to use, pretty much. So getting the right person at the start obviously removes the chances of you having to performance manage or exit that person out of the business. And I'm not saying you should never exit a person out of the business, far from it. If you've got the wrong person, then that needs to happen. But if you do it wrong, then boy, can that get painful. Okay, and I bet you there's someone on this webinar just now that has got some good stories of woe from that particular department. Okay.
Well, let's move on to the sorry, we've got number 6. I thought
I snuck one in, Nancy.
You did.
Because I think this one, this one I can't put a price on this one, right?
Actually, Dave, I'm just going to say, I mean, this wasn't a veterinary business, but it was another client of ours. And when I first met him, I mean, you just wouldn't believe how ill that guy looked. And he had a team member who was just a complete nightmare working for him. And yeah, he'd been off sick for several days. He'd just come in to see me because he needed to work out how he was going to deal with this guy. It was just a living hell for him, basically. So yeah, horrendous.
Right, a living hell. And how many, there's a lot, thankfully there's a lot more study and a lot more thought and money and funds going into why vets commit suicide at 4 times the national average. So you can't put a price on the quality of your life, really, but it is absolutely the most important thing. Sure, we're here to help animals and all of that. Ultimately, we're here to be happy and enjoy what we're doing. And when you have the wrong people in your business, yeah, you're just not going to have a good time. And that's where performance management starts to fall down and be horrible. All right, Nancy, let's
move on then.
Crack on. All right, so the top 5 mistakes everyone makes. So let's hit number 1. Nancy, do you want to?
No preparation. This is what I see all the time, and I'm not just going to pick on you veterinary people, because everyone does this. They don't prepare properly. They don't think about what they're doing. They throw an ad out, probably the same one they've done before, and they do a cursory interview. Don't really think what they're doing, and then they end up hiring someone really bad. That is the top one. And it's because you're too busy, you haven't got time, you don't really know what to do and so on. But we are going to stamp on that mistake by the end of this webinar, aren't we, Dave? So let's move on to number 2.
Well,
that's the money.
You want to shoot through that? I was going to one little word on that, and I'll flick very quickly through this slide, basically. And that is, and I heard this fascinating podcast I was listening to with this guy who's got the brain the size of like the moon. Yeah. Super high IQ, and he goes in these software challenges, and they code. They get given a bit of a problem to solve with code, and they have to code. And he says the people that win that challenge are the people who sit there and they think about stuff for about 60% of the time, maybe 70% of the time available. They figure it out before they start coding, and then the last sort of chunk of time, then they write. And it's consistently the people that sit there and think and plan that win a challenge like that. And that's very replicable.
Very good example. Yeah.
Aspect of life. Here's what we do. Okay, we panic. We're like, oh God, and often we have to. We do this in a panic because oh God, we've got a hole to fill in the roster. Maybe that's not as bad now with more emergency service providers, but it's still there. The pressure's still there to fill a gap when somebody leaves because the boss or a senior vet's going to have to pull more overtime shifts and not see their family. So there's just this pressure to fill the gap.
Yeah. And I think it's that focus on the immediate loss of revenue instead of thinking about okay, so you may lose a bit of revenue now, but in the long term, getting the wrong person will cost you an awful lot more.
Just crush you, exactly. Okay, so this is my favorite mistake.
Oh, yeah, we've seen some really bad ads, actually, haven't we?
We've seen some horror shows, and I'll be quick with this one. Everybody's writing ads that are so grey or beige or boring. They look like everybody else's ads. The clue is in the word advert. An advert is there to stand out from the crowd. It's there to get attention. It's not there to blend in with everything else. And you know why we do it? Because we're scared to look a little different. We're scared to look a little off the wall. But we are all a little different. Like, we're all a bit weird in veterinary medicine, right? So we should be proud of that and get out there and write some adverts that are colourful. Now, obviously, there's more to it than that. But the mistake is trying to blend in and being boring and dull. One little funny side story, Nancy. Nancy and I took a training course on recruitment around Australia.
Yeah. And
we were in Melbourne, and I put up some sample ads that I'd pulled off of a job board, and you might see where this is going. And we basically deconstructed them, not always with good humour, but fairly viciously. And so I went to the bathroom, and I use a giant. I mean, he basically was Gulliver, rumbles up next to me, and he says, "Mate, you know that advert?" That was me right there. I'm going to get flushed down the toilet here. Yeah. But he was grateful. I think he did punch me. All right. Mistake number 3. One of your
Yes.
faves, Nancy.
One cursory interview. Yeah, interviewing has the least validity and success of any recruitment or hiring tool. Basically, we are really, really bad at judging how good someone's going to be from just an interview. Please do not just do that.
It's in the low teens, isn't it? I mean,
it's terrible. Absolutely terrible. And we know this because, if you think of people perhaps you met at college, or some nice person you met one evening at a party and you think they're great, and then the next day, or when you meet them the next time, you think, oh my goodness, did I really think this person? And we've all done that. And we've also all got to know that person who initially we didn't particularly like, or wasn't particularly exciting, or whatever, and they've become really good friends or really good employees. And in fact, Dave, I think you could honestly say one of the people who really, really wasn't performing well in your practice ended up being one of the absolute star performers.
Oh, those first impressions, yeah. I mean, look,
it's totally wrong, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm not going to name names, but I would have, if I wouldn't had a process, I'd have made the biggest mistake of my life.
Yeah.
Because I thought the first time I met this person, what is this? I don't think I can work with it. Because she was so opposite to me, and so I didn't want to.
She was absolutely fantastic, wasn't she?
So total, complete, and utter rock star, and she's just smashing it out of the park. So proud of her. So yeah, I'll make a little aside on here as well, Nancy, and that is, I didn't put it in the brackets, but it's one cursory interview in the pub.
Yes, that is really a big mistake. So next mistake then, Dave.
Now, your vets, okay, so like I put this slide up in presenting live, like in front of an audience, and then it's like people are like, huh, it's just a picture of a dog, what's that? And then eventually they're like, oh, hang on, it's a bit broken. Now, please don't think we're saying don't hire disabled people because of this slide. That the thought just flashed across my brain there. That is not what we're saying. But when we don't have a process, and when you're doing things touchy-feely, or because you like this person, or you've read their CV and it's a lovely CV, you're introducing so many biases that you just cannot possibly peel back the layer of the onion to get to the right place.
What you really need to be doing is being absolutely crystal clear about your criteria and what you're looking for in your candidate, and then you need to be finding out whether the candidate's got those things. And if you're just giving a sort of glance and using your initial feelings, and using resumes and CVs is a really, really difficult way to sort your candidates. So yeah, that's a big mistake that many people make, because they don't know any better, but you will by the end of this.
Oh yeah, you'll be crystal clear. Alrighty. Thinking you're done when you're fired. Okay, and so this was a mistake. Actually, to be fair, Nancy, I'd stopped making this mistake by the time I met you.
Yes.
But just, it's the sink or swim approach. So you've found the person, you're really excited about them starting, but you've got a giant hole in your roster rota. And so you're like, you shouldn't be doing this, right? You know you shouldn't be doing this. But you think there's no option. Okay, I have no option, but I've got to put them in this place. And they're on their own with that receptionist who actually is a bit annoying and is probably going to teach them a lot of stuff I don't want, and I've been trying to teach her not to do for a while. And I've still not addressed that. So now I've got two people who, now she's doing my induction program.
So I think the key thing is to bear in mind that your process, your hiring process, is only finished when that person is performing in the job. Then you can say, right, okay, now we've finished. So you need to be making sure that you're actually training that person, you've got a proper plan, and you're monitoring their performance. You should be doing that all the time anyway, but it's that sort of thing, having milestones and making sure that once you've got them through the door, you then continue that process, because that's actually absolutely vital. In fact, I was just writing a blog a couple of days ago on when I turned a business round years ago. They had 100% turnover rate. That means every person basically left every year. And I changed that to 25%, which is still way too high. But all I did was introduce a training program. they actually used to have people who would have gone before lunch when they started. They wouldn't even make it to lunch. In fact, some of them didn't even make it to the coffee break. So I'm sure none of you is that bad. But please remember, this is really important. The hiring's only finished when they're actually performing in the job.
Right,
okay.
I'm on that point, right? I'm just setting up a little poll here on the fly.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Because I'm kind of like, okay, let's just check that out there. Okay, this is totally anonymous. Like we cannot see who will get grouped aggregate data. But if you would answer this, I'm going to put that. You'll see there's one at the end. I'll make the results public, so you will see the result as well. But we won't see who answers what. Okay, so on the right you've got a little poll question, and it's, what's your team turnover rate been in the last 12 months? Now, if you're shy, don't say. And so by team turnover, we're talking about like the number of people who have left the business in the last 12 months. Okay. We got one or two starting to come in there. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. I put 100% plus, Nancy. I've seen that.
Yeah, well, I
haven't worked in it, but I worked in a practice next to a practice where the it was like a revolving door, and it's hideous. So, all right, let's end that poll. So 20, under 25%, 67% are saying under 25%,
which is good.
A third of people 25 to 50%. Nancy, what's national average on that?
Well, it depends on the industry. I don't know what it is in the veterinary industry, but in the NHS it used to be.
It's okay. Sorry, I shouldn't. I'll tell you why I laughed in a second.
Quite high. I mean, I think the NHS is quite high. It may be something like 10%, but I haven't looked at the figures for a while. But a good one would be about 3%.
Good God! Right. Okay. So let's just digest that for a wee second. A good would be 3%, and the NHS is you think it's about 10%.
I mean, it depends on the different, the nurses, the doctors, and so on, and
geography. But boy, I would tell you right now that I have yet to meet a practice that wouldn't take your arm off for 10%. Right. I mean, ping me in the chat box if you disagree with that.
Yeah. It may be higher now than it used to be, because people don't sort of have jobs for life now as they used to. So it's probably higher than it was, in my youth. And it also depends on whether you want fresh blood and all that kind of thing. But the key thing is, you don't really want everyone leaving every year, or even half your people, probably, because that's a lot of effort.
And the damage that does. I mean, we operate businesses that effectively are founded on trust, and without trust, you've nothing. And without time in relationships, you don't have trust.
Yeah.
If you're worried about corporates opening up next door to you, that's why you shouldn't worry, because it's they have a hard time retaining team members. Not, and I'm not saying because they're bad people, but because the recruiting body, the gene pool, the talent pool that we are pulling from is much more transitory just now. So it isn't just a corporate practice, but in an independent practice, you've got the anchor there that's the boss that always holds the relationships together. They're the glue. Trouble is, that's a set of golden handcuffs right there. So what we need to do with your hiring process is find people that aren't in the revolving door situation, that do want to stay with your business and practice for a considerable amount of time and build up those relationships. Okay, so that's like a pretty whizzy run through the mistakes. Let's get, and we're running a little ahead of time, which is kind of cool.
It's all right. That's okay. So we've got some more time to talk about the things you can do,
which I think is important.
Exactly. Certainly.
So did we get your attention? Did we get your attention? Are you ready to learn some fixes? We've got 3 up here. So let's dive a little deeper into these 3 and what they mean, and how you guys can start to implement these things right away, okay? And then we're going to follow that up with a tool that you can use that is pretty awesome. And I say that because I have used it, still use it, and will always use it because it rocks and makes a big difference. So Nancy, do you want to?
I will. The
Take the
first
first one.
one, thinking
Yeah.
long and hard about what you need.
What are practices and what do the guys need to do in order to start this process off on the right foot?
Well, the first thing, when you're thinking about what you need, I mean, it's probably easier if we use an example, actually. So if we go for that receptionist post, Dave, that the first thing that we worked on,
Yeah.
I know, because they've told me, that quite a lot of veterinary nurses don't just join the industry because they like animals, but because they're not that keen on people. And so, which is fair enough, you know, not all of us are that nice. But if you then use those veterinary nurses on your reception desk, obviously that's not a really good thing to do. And I certainly can speak from experience. We have now 2 cats, and I spent quite a lot of time going into the vets, and yeah, some of those nurses really aren't that friendly and good with people. So when Dave realised, you know, you needed someone for reception, you're very careful with your money, aren't you, Dave? I don't think we could say we're just stereotyping there. Dave is very careful with his money. He's not mean, he's just careful. And he wasn't really very happy about the prospect of spending more on a reception position than he absolutely needed to.
Let me interject briefly just to set the scene there,
Yeah.
and not just because I'm objecting to your borderline racist comment, but
no one knows where you come from, Dave. So how do you
there's such a global accent these days.
Yeah.
So let me just interject, because I come from the UK, where we, certainly the practices that I had worked in had all been very high quality practices, and there were very high numbers, much higher than the UK average, support staff, ancillary staff to doctor ratio. And then I went to Australia, and for the first 18 months, I was only going to be there for 12 months. And so I just took a position as an assistant, and I started running a little hospital in Sydney. And what I saw was they were using their purses to work the front desk. And it just happened that I was blessed with, you know, the rarest of nurses, and that was nurses who were just as happy out front as were out back. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. You can save a bit of money there. Right, back to you, Nancy.
Yes, so we went through what Dave actually needed in that role, and it turned out that there were quite a few other things apart from just the reception desk that you needed. And Dave doesn't really like filing. I think we can say that quite fairly, can't we? Dave hates filing.
Correct.
Desk is a mess, awful. So he really needed someone who could do filing. He needed someone who could reconcile his expenses. And let's face it, which of us likes reconciling our expenses? I don't enjoy that myself. Needed someone who could handle the incoming phone calls, who could deal with people, deal with suppliers, all those kinds of things. And actually, when we listed that all out, there was a lot more than just receptionist there. Yeah. And we worked out the kind of personality we needed, and that needed to be someone who we would call procedural, someone who was great at just getting things done, sticking to procedures, and just making sure stuff happens. So I came up with an ad, which I can talk about the ad, can't, because it fits into the story. We came up with this ad that detailed all this stuff out. Now, the thing with an ad is it's there to attract the person that you're looking for, not hordes of people who, you know, probably won't do a very good job, but you want the person who's going to be perfect at this job. And in that kind of job, you want someone who's good at detail, who likes doing stuff, who likes ticking off lists, and who likes keeping everything sorted for someone else. So I came up with this headline that was something like, "Help, can you sort me out?" Was it that, Dave?
It was exactly that, yes.
And then
Help, exclamation mark, can you sort me out?
And then it went on about, you know, I'm useless at keeping my desk tidy, I hate filing, I've got all this stuff. And Dave's like, oh, no, can't do that. No. Really, you weren't keen, were you?
No, and it was exactly what I was saying before. It was, you know, we were writing an advert, and you write an advert, and you want the world to think the sun shines out your little bum. And that's what you think when you write an advert. And that, of course, everyone thinks that, so they write adverts that are all bullshit.
Yeah, but of course, I'd come from a different sort of world where I've been working with a guy who's sort of a marketing person. He really talks about the ad has to grab the person. That's the first thing you want, is you will need to get the attention of the person you're looking for. Well, I knew we needed someone who just liked looking after other people. And Dave wasn't really aware that there were people around like that, because that's not really how he is. I mean, he's very nice, but, you know, that's not his sole purpose in life. But I knew that that sort of person would be attracted to a job that asked for help. So we put the ad up, and guess what? We actually got people who love looking after other people. And that's really the test of your advertisement. Does it attract the right sort of people? And if it's honest and it really explains those unpleasant bits of the job, the weird thing is that they may be unpleasant bits to you, like the filing and the reconciling and stuff, but to a person that likes them, they're good. And if you hide those and don't put them in the ads, then of course what you get is people who apply for the job, don't realise those bits are in it, and then when they get the job and find out that you've got those unpleasant bits, then they go, or they just constantly moan about it. So it's just much better to put it in the ad, be really clear and specific. And when you've got an ad, I mean, here's an extra little bonus tip for you. If you are trying to hire someone who's going to have to deal with a lot of detail, you need to write a long advertisement. Am I giving away the farm here, Dave? I think
No.
fair enough, isn't it? Yes, it's a really, really important thing. If you write a very short advertisement, someone who likes lots of details just won't be interested. Now, we used to have a bookkeeper, Roz, who was absolutely phenomenal. I think you dealt with Roz, didn't you, Dave, over the years?
Yep.
And she unfortunately died a few years ago now, and she was working for us from her hospital bed, unbelievably. She was just such a reliable, dedicated individual, and she loved detail. That's what you want in a bookkeeper. And I would always show these advertisements to Roz to see if she liked them, and she'd always pick out the mistakes and everything. And I'd write a really long ad, and I put all my effort into it, and she'd send it back. She'd say, well, there were these spelling mistakes, this typo here, I've corrected all this. And she'd always say at the end, and it's a bit short.
That's my abiding memory of Roz. Was the longest advert I could possibly conjure. She went, it's not very long.
It's not very long, because she liked the detail, and that made her feel comfortable and happy with that role. And I'm not that detailed person, so it's very hard for me to write those ads, which is why I always used to get Roz to check them for me. So the key thing is then be really clear about what you need, and we've got a tool that really help you do that. And then write an ad that is very, very honest and very specific about what you need. Now, if you're looking for someone who doesn't like detail, it's to be quite a short ad with bullet points.
Nancy, break it down a little. You're crushing through some really cool stuff there, and there's a couple of things that just jumped out. Just things. First one though, I wanted to repeat, and it's back to front. Okay, so because we're sort of lapsing toward the advert, but there's a really profoundly powerful thing you said there, that people don't have this in their brain. When you're writing for an audience of one. Your purpose with your advert is not to get you some feel-good moment where 30 people apply, because guess what that does? That creates 30 different people you've got to screen, answer to, and choose up your time. It's just a waste. The best recruitment campaign you can possibly imagine is you post an advert. Your advert's job is twofold. It's to attract the one. It's to put all the other tire kickers off. You don't want to. So. That's why you've got to be brutally honest about it. Yeah. So let me flip back to the first question. We've said think long and hard. I want to give a little more detail to that. What are the 3 areas or 4 areas, or what are the areas that people need to be filling? And we're talking about building a person specification here. So give me a little detail on what is a person specification. And
the key thing with a person specification is it should have in there all the information you need so that you can recognize that person that you're looking for. So you need to know what they can do, not have they got 23 years experience in this or 5 years experience in that. You want to know, can they do this specific thing? And you also want to know, in this specific situation, will they behave in this particular way? And there are all sorts of different ways you might want people to behave in situations, and that is down to you and the way you run your hospital and your business. But the clearer you can be about, in this situation, you know, if we've got a customer who has accidentally been charged twice and is really annoyed about it, what do I want this person to do? Or if we've got someone whose dog is really ill and is going to die, what do I want this person to do? How do I want them to deal with that situation? So I think it's always really useful to identify 5 or 6 tricky situations that individual's likely to find themselves in, and then say, okay, what would I like them to do? Now, you may find that hard. So a shortcut to that is to pick the person you know who's really good in this role and pick the situations where you felt they did a fabulous job. If you can't do that, the other way is to pick the situations that someone else completely messed up and did really badly and say, what should this person have done in that situation? But that, in my view, is one of the easiest ways to get this information out of your head. Because the thing is, the information is there in your head.
Yep.
But it's, I mean, you know, Dave, it took us quite some time to get some of that out of your head, didn't it? But once we had got it out, it's sort of obvious.
Yep.
You know, this is how we want a person to deal with someone whose dog is going to die, or who's brought their animal and it's just been in a dreadful accident and we're going to have to amputate one of its limbs. You know, how are they going to deal with that? Or someone who it's just going to cost them way too much and they won't be able to afford it. How are they going to deal with that?
Right.
Because anyone can deal with the nice, easy situations.
Yeah.
But it's what you need them to do in those difficult situations, and then you use that information. I mean, should we look at this situation-based interview questions here,
Yeah,
Dave?
well, move into that, because that's quite good. Can I just so that's gold. I feel like we're giving some awesome value there. So
I hope so.
So, and I've used that tool over and over again. Right now, I'm actually going to be recruiting for an admin assistant and somebody who's going to look after Marsha a little bit. And the Nancy and I actually recruited my daughter's first nanny.
Yeah.
And we got like, she's superwoman. Like, if I wish I could have brought her to Britain from Australia.
Yeah, but you didn't. The first one wasn't, was she? Do you remember?
Yeah, the first one was definitely
Yes, because Dave decided he wasn't going to take my advice. I said, yes, she's really nice, but here's the problem you're going to get. Oh, no, we really like her. She'll be great. And you made that mistake that we talked about right at the beginning of here, just hiring someone because you liked them. Because she was nice, wasn't she?
And I think there was a time pressure, and there was also a significant other pressure.
Yeah, yes.
That isn't in the loop. So we chose the wrong person, and now the second person. So she was gone fairly quickly, and then the second person we got she was so perfect, and
because
now
she did match the spec, didn't
she? And I model anybody I'm thinking about for admin work on this person now, and her profile, which we kept that profile and now recruit against that. That's an absolutely crushing one. One other point I would add to that is, don't just think about things that they're going to be doing with your clients, your customers. Think about the tough situations in the prep room, in the operating theatre, like those flare points that happen in the day where resources are everyone's competing for resources. How are they going to act then? Because that's where a lot of the real team ripples can come from as well.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely. So
back to you, Nancy.
So we've talked about identifying what you actually need. We've talked about an advertisement that's honest and clear and straightforward and tailored to the person you're writing to and you want to hire. Well, here's another step. Once you've got your candidates, then in the interview, and there's actually various other things you can do, but we're just talking about the interview now, you need to ask them about times they have dealt with those sorts of situations. Do not bother to ask them, well, if you encountered a really difficult customer, what would you do? Because no one's going to say, well, I'd mess up completely and I'd shout at them and I'd let them down, even if that is what they've normally done. So what you actually need to do is ask them, okay, Dave, have you had a client who's fallen behind in their payments? What happened? What did you do? What was the result? Now, if you ask those questions, and these are pretty straightforward questions, you can use very similar questions in most situations, what you'll find is you will get some really useful information. And sometimes you will uncover that people aren't telling the truth. It doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. And I interviewed someone who was going for project manager, needed to be able to use some specific software. So we said, have you used this software? Oh, yeah, absolutely. What did you use it for? Long silence. Oh, this project. And then I asked him to explain what he'd actually done with it. I don't think he'd even taken the cellophane off the box.
Yeah, right.
Because he just couldn't answer the questions. And if you dig down and say, okay, well, what happened? What was the situation? How much was it? What did you say? What did they say? What was the output? You will get really, really useful information. Now, it may be, you're not going to get the perfect answer, but if you've got someone who said, well, yes, I did this, and actually I learned that really next time I should do X, that's okay, because we all need to learn. But if you ask questions about the actual situations, like the teamwork situations Dave's describing, have you been in theatre when there's been a mistake, or when someone's lost an instrument, or I don't know what the horrible things that happen in theatre are, but ask about those. What happened? What did you do? What did the other person do? I'll give you one of my favourite questions here. This is such gold dust. Ask if something went wrong, whose fault was it? Now, Dave knows this one. The reason I always suggest you ask this is because one of the biggest problems in teams is people who blame other people for stuff and don't take responsibility.
All right, stop right there. Please, anyone got a blame culture thing happening in their practice? You guys, ping it in the chat box. Like, this is such a hot topic in veterinary medicine.
Yeah, it's a really, really sort of, it's a very unpleasant and sort of draining thing, and it's awful for everyone. So what people who blame other people for do is they don't take responsibility for their own actions and situations. So if you say, okay, Dave, what happened? Whose fault was it? And Dave goes, well, it was that nurse. She's completely useless. She's always making these mistakes, blah, blah, blah. You've got someone who's going to blame other people. If he says, well, it was Anne, the nurse, who dropped that scalpel, but to be fair, she was trying to do this other thing. The equipment she was working was doing this, and actually, I don't think it had been put in the right place in the first place. So she was doing the best she could. Very different way of describing the situation. And if you take nothing else away from you today, take that one, because if it can save you from getting that kind of environment where you work, it'd be well worth doing. Really, really useful questions. So just to summarize then on the questions, ask about actual situations people have dealt with, and then say, well, what happened? What did you do? What did they say? What did you say? What was the result? You can ask, what did you learn? Or did you learn anything from that? Or would you do it differently if you were going to handle it again? Quite useful question as well.
Crucial thing, they're all open questions, right? You're not leading them anywhere. You're giving them enough rope to hang themselves or to show you how awesome they are.
Yeah, well, except for the first one where you say, have you ever dealt with this situation? Because if they haven't, well, then you need to move on to a different one. So I'd always have a few examples in there. But then after that, yes, it's those open, what happened? What did you do? Mostly they begin with what.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably a couple of things to be going on with, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's move on to our next step, which is the
all right. So
away.
The question I got for you is, do you want to take 10 years of goofing it up and making mistakes, and some of which you can't take back, or do you want to get on an accelerator and do this a whole lot faster and not make those mistakes? And so avoid. I think I was totting up as we're going along there. Nancy, you and I have actually done the maths on the cost of a bad hire, and there are varying reports on that. But if you look at the cost we just went through there, let's say 500 for your initial job advert. Let's conservatively say you do a week of induction. Let's call it maybe about 5,000 of revenue drop because you've done induction or onboarding. You've got your hit to sales. Now again, let's just conservative. Let's be really, really nice and call it about 50 grand, shall we? Your hit on, maybe you got a couple of other vets that drop off a couple, maybe 20 grand. So let's put 40 grand, 40,000 in there. And then actually, you know what? The somebody going out the wrong way is a hypothetical, but we're getting damn close to £100,000 worth because you hired a bad vet.
Yeah,
Now,
and we've seen actually higher costs than that, haven't we?
way higher, yeah.
Yeah, calculated it all out. I've seen even worse ones than that. So yeah, so it's bad, everyone. I think that's the key thing. It's
typically bad. Yeah, four times base salary, but it can't. I've seen reported up to 14. All right, we do not wish that to be your. And so if you've got a practice that's struggling, you're wondering where your pain's coming from, this is likely to be right at the heart and the center of it. Okay, what you require, what basically every business problem requires, is a system and good people within the system. Okay, most practices, and certainly if you're an owner on this call or a manager and you go away and things slack off, then it's probably because there's no system with no clear objectives, and so the people just don't know what to do, or you got the wrong people. So how's about you implemented a process? What would it be worth to you to implement a process that took a lot of the pain away? Well, let's just take a look at this for a little second, because this is the process that I have used over the last 5 years, running hospitals in Australia, consulting with practices in the UK, and it's proven time and time again, if you follow the process, you get significant improvement in results. By significant improvement, we mean like double revenue type stuff. It's have a happier life. It's spend more time with the kids or on the golf course or whatever it is that your thing is. It's more freedom to do the things that you want to do, and it's more enjoyment of the job you've got. So we developed a 9-step process. This is it. This is what Nancy and I have been working on over the last 5 years. And so we'll run through this top level. So you do your preparation, you write your laser targeted job advert, you send people to a bunch of tests that are online. So once you write the advert, you don't take the phone call, you don't look at the CVs, you send them to an online selection web page that you set up on your website. It's really easy to do. Or you just say, hey, nice to meet you, and you send them an email back going, right, cool, great, nice to meet you. We got some tests for you to do. And that starts eliminating all the tire kickers. You will kick out 80% of the tire kicking applicants. Now, when you're hiring for nurses and for vets that can be in scarce supply, that doesn't necessarily save you a whole lot of time, but it still stops you hiring the wrong people. When you're hiring for a higher volume position, like a new graduate vet position or a training nurse position or a client care position, you can get 30 or 40 applicants for one role, and you just do not want to be kicking through a pile of.
It still does save you time with your vets and so on, because you get really useful information out of that process in very little time, basically. Yeah. It tells you what the skill level is, what people can do, what they can't do. And, you know, if you're going to take them forward to an interview, then it gives you the information you need in order to make that decision. Because the trouble with sorting with resumes and CVs is you just don't have the information you need to make the decision. That's why it's so difficult. So this process makes that way, way easier. Sorry, carry on, Dave. I interrupted you.
Okay. And next up, you post the advert, so you point it in the right place. That's really important. And then your applicants do the tests. Only next up, that we do an audio interview. This is what we recommend. You just get on the phone with somebody at that point, and the audio interview is something a bit cool. Now, we don't have time to go into it right now. We've got like an hour. We're coming up on time really close.
1.5 minutes to go, but we're not far off now.
But the audio interviews are where we recommend doing a psychometric profile. Okay, now we won't go deep into that just now. If you guys want another webinar in the future, we're open to talk about that then. And look, we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps in, and finally we get to the interview phase. Okay, that's how little we value we place on the way people currently recruit. Okay, and the final interview, you are not doing an interview in a pub. You're setting up practical tasks, and then you're asking them situational based questions and really grilling them on what's real in their brain. Finally, you've got the successful candidate. You're going to onboard them, give them an induction plan, and get them up to speed. And then the last step is you review the process. Did it work? What worked? What didn't work? Do we need to juggle something around? That's the process Nancy and I put together. It's called the Recruit Right for Vets hiring system. Now, if you've enjoyed what Nancy and I have been teaching you on this webinar, if you think there is value, if you see value in this information, and you think, okay, that's a system I like the sound of it. I like the fact it's scientific, it's a process, it's repeatable, it's proven to work. If you like the sound of those things and you'd like to learn more, then Nancy and I would like to invite you to go in a little bit of a deeper dive and to learn more. We've really given you the outline of what the problems with current recruitment is in the veterinary workplace and some solutions to help you with those things, address those issues. But what we're not able to do in a 1 hour webinar is give you a detailed, deep, intensive learning process about how to do this, deliver this system effectively. That's what we'd really like to do. And so we have published another 5 webinars in this training series. If you would like to sign up for those, then what you're going to get is webinar number 2. You've just listened to webinar number 1. Webinar number 2 is all about creation of the basic documents you need and preparing for your recruitment campaign. So that's how to write and create good objectives, how to create person specification, and what are the differences between objectives, job descriptions, etc. So that's webinar number 2. Webinar number 3 is how to write the laser targeted job advert, one of the most important parts of the process. There's a whole hour dedicated to that. That's one of my favorite ones, and it's a good fun webinar. That one involves getting your creative juices going, and we'll teach you how to write job adverts. We'll really push you outside of your comfort zone during that webinar, but you will get much better responses to your adverts by doing it. Webinar 4 is then about how to create and really the thinking behind the online tests and why we advocate using these so strongly in this process. So we'll show you how to go about creating online tests, and then you should be in a position to be able to do that. Webinar 5 is then about using those tests and how to interview effectively. Now that is a crucial skill that most of us never get a day's worth of training at any point in our lives. So what we do is we make it up based on what we've seen others doing, and so we just create this sort of recurring loop of pain in terms of us not doing a very good job of interviewing. Once you've listened to this webinar, you will be in no doubt as to how to conduct an effective employment interview, and the quality of the people you hire will go up dramatically as a result. So that's webinar 5. Then webinar 6, once you've made the hire, it's not a good campaign unless that person starts delivering the goods in the job quickly. So we want you to have the skills to get them up to speed, get them doing the job effectively, and that's called an onboarding or an induction campaign process. So we're going to talk you through how to do that effectively. What do you need to do? How do you go about making sure that person knows exactly what they need to do and in order to be doing a good job? And also, in the event that it doesn't work out, because even if you use a system like that, sometimes it won't, how to spot that as a problem and what to do about it to remedy it as quickly as is possible. So that's the 6 webinar series in total. As I just said, you've listened to the first one. We have made the next 5 available, and the cost for the whole series is just £99. So you get access to 6 hours worth of training, £99, that is going to make an immediate massive impact on your recruitment campaigns. So if you'd like to take us up on that offer, and you'd like to, if you can bear listening to Nancy and I for a little bit longer, and you think this has been great value, then I would invite you to go to this website. So it's www.drdavenicol.com/recruit training. That's www.drdavenicol.com/recruit training. And so it's the Dr. Dave Nicol bit, just because sometimes people get my name wrong, is drdavenicol.com/recruit training. Now, the URL is up there on the screen, and I'm also going to redirect you. There'll be a clickable link appearing on your screen just now as well, I think over on the sidebar. So if you can click on that, then that will take you across to the page where you get a little bit more information about the content of the course, and then there's lots of red buttons all over that page. Just click on one of those, it'll take you to the payment page. It's a one-time payment, it's lifetime access, and if you do the webinars and you get to the end of the course, you must have done all 6 of them. If you get to the end of that course and you think they were not worth the money that you paid, then we are happy to give you your money back. So it is a satisfaction backed guarantee that makes it zero risk to you. Of course, nobody's ever asked us for that money back because there is just massive value in those webinars. You guys, if you've liked listening to me and Nancy here, or if you've ever been to any of my talks, it's super important that you don't just get something that entertains you, but you get something that is of practical, applicable value. And this series, the recruitment webinar training series, really is the pinnacle of that. It's one of the most important processes you can have in your practice, and it's available for you for £99. So that's it for this webinar. Thank you very, very much for attending. Thank you for listening, and Nancy and I very much look forward to seeing you on the rest of the training series. So thank you, and have a good night or day wherever you are on planet Earth.